All these cases that I'm talking about, I haven't fully researched them enough to do an episode dedicated to them. So this is just me talking and catching up with y'all and telling you what my thoughts have been over the last few weeks. Hey y'all, welcome back to Random Mama. I'm Lisa. If you're new here and you're into deep dives on true crime, please consider giving me a subscribe. I think you'll like what you see. So it's been a while and I'm really sorry for being away as long as I have. I think in my last video, I mentioned there was a lot going on in my life. My job situation changed in June, so there was a big upsetting of the apple cart that happened there. But now things are a little bit more predictable and regular, so I really wanted to get back into these videos. And also, I think I've mentioned in the past, I've had so many debates in my mind recently about true crime and how to talk about it ethically. And then from a more woo-woo perspective, is it healthy for us to consume true crime? I'll speak about it from my perspective. I, especially a few months ago, was consuming it a lot, and there were a couple of cases, one was new and one was old, that left this residue with me, like emotional half-life kind of a thing, that was so disturbing and upsetting. And that's when I started thinking about it, and then thinking about it as a creator who puts this kind of content out. I'm still actively grappling with how to do it in an ethical way, a way that's ethical both to the victims and their families, and a way that's also ethical to my audience, and making sure that I'm not putting content out there that's so deeply disturbing and upsetting and on a woo-woo energetic level probably isn't the best thing for them to be consuming. If y'all have ideas about that, I'd love to hear, because this is a debate that goes on in my mind 24 hours of the day. It's kind of like a rotation of maybe a dozen things or something that you think about all the time. At least that's the way it is for me. This is one of them. So I would love to hear your thoughts about it if you have them. And the last thing I'll say about that is the part of me that's always been interested in true crime is the part of me that is just fascinated by psychology. And back when I was acting more regularly, I was always fascinated by, to be a good actor, I think you have to have a level of empathy that allows you to imagine what it's like in someone else's shoes, whether it's the perpetrator or the victim. And I think I've always had that need to try to understand where people are coming from. I think there's a lot of ways that can be entertaining and educational, hopefully. I know that the shows that I watch on YouTube, those are my favorites, the ones that are educational, but they're also entertaining. Also, I spoke to a friend of mine recently who's a psychic, and she agreed to come on my channel. So I'm gonna have her on probably in a few weeks or so, just to ask her all these questions that I think a lot of people could have too. Hopefully that won't be too upsetting to subscribers who are expecting to just see true crime content, but I do think that there will be true crime aspects woven into that. I'm trying to be brave about the content that I put out, that it's completely authentic and not just putting out video after video of JonBenet, which, speaking of, you all probably know there's been all these recent developments in the JonBenet case, which I have to take a deeper look into. But I was watching the interview episode the other night that had on Gary Oliva's friend, I guess you could say, or acquaintance, who was a pen pal of his for many, many years. And allegedly, Gary Oliva admitted a lot of incriminating things to this friend, and I would go take a listen if you have the time. It's fascinating to hear his friend talk about Gary Oliva, and then for the experts to, from a profiling perspective, take a look at how that matches up with the type of person that they would expect to commit the crime. I, like a lot of people, get really hung up on the handwriting, and it's so hard to unsee the similarities between Patsy and the ransom note. And at the same time, that I don't have a trained expert eye, but it seems pretty obvious at a glance. But Gary Oliva's friend also said that his handwriting is very, very similar.
I'm editing the video now and watching it back, and I just saw what I think looks like an orb. So I'm gonna replay that section again and slow it down for y'all. Oof, we are in spooky season, aren't we?
It's interesting. They talk about all the weird aspects of the case and how it could be accounted for by the fact that Gary lived very much in a fantasy world. And when he was potentially encountering JonBenet, that there was a divide, a fantasy in his mind, and the actual reality of a little girl, meaning that there's a chance that he never meant to kill her if, in fact, he is the perpetrator. So a lot of interesting stuff in that, and I have to do a bit more research and study before I feel comfortable talking further about that. But I definitely wanted to ask y'all what you think, especially about Patsy and the handwriting, and what do you think about the intruder theory in general? There's a lot there. And then as far as the Idaho 4 case goes, y'all, it is sending me for a tailspin. I really can't tell if this is a case of the defense doing a really good job of poking holes even before they've gotten to trial and establishing some reasonable doubt. I have a lot of questions. And again, this is another case. All these cases that I'm talking about, I haven't fully researched them enough to do an episode dedicated to them. So this is just me talking and catching up with y'all and telling you what my thoughts have been over the last few weeks since we've checked in. And yeah, now like I said, I still have to do a deeper dive, but now I am a little not so sure about Bryan Kohberger. And one of the things that gives me pause is him not having any DNA in his car. And part of what they say is they explain that by saying, okay, well, he purchased a Dickies jumpsuit because they have his Amazon history, which if y'all had my Amazon history, I feel like you would know exactly what my life looked like. I definitely use Amazon way too much. So what they posit is that he had this Dickies jumpsuit and he just took it off, put it in a bag, tied that bag up, put it in his trunk. So there's that with Idaho 4. And then I feel like a similar thing is happening with the Delphi case. Richard Allen, I put up that short when he confessed and over the phone to his wife a few times. And again, that felt like a smoking gun kind of thing to me, just like the DNA, Kohberger's DNA on the sheath. And then the defense puts out this whole, what's the name of it now? It's escaping me.
Y'all know when you get a similar word stuck in your head for a word that you're trying to remember? I kept having Orion stuck in my head, and the word that I was trying to recall was Odin, or Odinism, which is, like I say, a cult or religion. I'm not exactly sure.
This whole other theory of the case. And then they even show that they have prison guards that are followers of that, I don't even know what you want to call it, like cult, religion, whatever it is. It's kind of similar to Bryan Kohberger. It's like, from a logistical standpoint, in the middle of the day, by himself, seems a little bit of a logistical stretch for one person. And I was watching this on the Law and Crime podcast where the writer of Forest for the Trees, I believe that's the name of the book, said that he had on good evidence that the recording, the infamous girls down the hill, is actually two different people. And in that recording, we always associate it as those words being together, but it was actually from two different parts of the recording that they have. If that's true, it makes you wonder, who else is it? And if it was, in fact, Richard Allen, there is someone else. And that's also what my thoughts have been about Bryan Kohberger. I find it very, very difficult to believe that one man by himself with paper-thin walls did all of that with a knife. That's not as expedient as it is with a gun. I know this is awful, but it's an up-close, gruesome crime, and for it to be done to 1, 2, 3, 4, that part of it just never made sense to me. And I remember when I got into one of my deep dives on Bryan, I showed the supposed path that he might have taken in the house. But what do y'all think? Do you think that Bryan Kohberger and Richard Allen's defense teams are just doing a really good job at poking holes in the case? And that's a tall order, because these are the most infamous current cases where everyone who's interested in true crime, they're consuming content on it. And people want so desperately for there to be justice for the victims and their families. As soon as we get a suspect in custody, and I'm very guilty of this myself, it's very difficult to presume their innocence. So I think it's very interesting that their defense teams are doing, in my opinion, such a good job of poking holes. Speak for myself, I was pretty convinced of their guilt based on certain physical and circumstantial evidence. So let me know what you think about those two cases. This is the last one I wanted to talk about. Oh, Mahek. And again, I need to look more into this, but she was found guilty, and I was very relieved about that. And I think she got a fairly just sentence, but I was very convinced of her guilt and her mother's guilt. All of these cases are senseless tragedies, but there's some cases where, in the case of Mahek Bukhari, where it's just so completely senseless. 2 young men dying because an inappropriate older woman couldn't behave like a grown-up and then couldn't accept the consequences of her actions. And look, I'm not ever advocating, if allegedly speaking, one of the victims was trying to, I guess, blackmail her, release photo evidence or video evidence of their affair to her husband, that's in no way, shape, or form correct, right? But it's also not punishable by death. And if any crime were, it's not at the hands of Mahek and her posse. So just a tragic case, and my heart goes out to the victims and their families, and I'm glad to see that justice was served there. But let me know, are you happy to see that she was found guilty? And also, I'm always very hesitant to talk about any cases in England because I'm so ignorant of the whole trial process over there and the language around it and everything. So, but anyway, those are my thoughts on that. I guess I'll talk a little bit, just a tiny bit, about those 2 cases that I alluded to. One of them, and I'll just put screenshots on the screen, so if you want to go look into them further, you can. Viewer advisory, they are very, very, very disturbing. So I feel like I shouldn't even mention them, but if I was a viewer and I was watching a creator talk about a case and not even mention it, that would really frustrate me. So the first one was by Dreading. I don't know if y'all know that channel. It's a huge channel. You probably know about it. It's such a good channel. It's really well done. And the brothers that do it do a really good job of very thoroughly researching cases. And if you're interested in the Delphi case, you should take a look at Dreading, because they have a few episodes on it, I think, and they are very thorough and good. He covered a case that's an older one, but I believe the murderer is about to be released in a couple of years or so. So I think that's why he's taking a look at it now. And I'll just broadly say it's the case of a boy, I believe he was 13 or 14 at the time, killing his sister in a very brutal way. And it was all to get back at the mother. And this may have been the inspiration for that novel, We Need to Talk About Kevin, that was then also made into a movie. If that was the inspiration for it, it is very spot on, because the case is so disturbing that it's one of those things that, like me, you're going to want to unwind it and understand what the hell happened. I think some people like me, that's a coping mechanism. If we can't change it, maybe if we can somehow understand it, that might give us the information to help prevent it or something like that. But anyway, very, very tragic case. And the other one is just so disgusting, so beyond repulsive. But in a nutshell, this man in the Midwest was living with a girlfriend. I believe she had her daughter and son living with them. They were teenagers and they had some friends come sleep over. She didn't know that her boyfriend was a sex offender. And not only that, he was awaiting trial for sexting with a minor, I believe, while he was incarcerated or on parole. This man was texting the woman who had been a minor at the time, who I believe is no longer a minor, threatening her that there would be dire consequences if she didn't drop the charges. And lo and behold, he stuck to his word on that, and there was a sleepover at his house with his girlfriend, her children, and her children's friends, all teenagers. And I don't even know how to put this. He essayed all of them. It appeared that he drugged them. When they looked at the house afterwards, there were all kinds of chains and bondage gear and toys and tools. And at the end of it, he murdered them, and then he also killed himself when all was said and done. And the parents were left to discover this and discover the scene the next day. It's cases like that that I really want. My mind goes to a spiritual place. And again, maybe this is coping, but that's when I have questions for my friend Kia, who's going to be a guest on here, who's a psychic, about the nature of evil, which for a long time I didn't believe in. I believed in that whole thing, evil is the construct that we as humans make in order to make ourselves feel more comfortable and draw lines in the sand where there are no real lines, because there's, the nature of reality is this dualistic thing, right? And anyway, so that's when I have questions for Kia, like, do you believe in evil? And, as far as disincarnate souls, have you encountered evil in them before? And like, kind of what function does evil serve? And where does it fit into our evolution as humans, as souls on a journey? If you believe that, I believe that. I hope this was coherent. I know this was really all over the place, but I just wanted to let y'all know where my head is and tell you thank you. I really appreciate all of you who are here, and I especially appreciate that I've had some new subscribers, and my older subscribers stick around and still comment and everything, and I really, really appreciate y'all for that. It was almost a year ago, maybe about 9 months ago, that I made my JonBenet series, which got a lot of attention. And after that, I remember being worried that if I didn't make JonBenet content, that maybe people wouldn't be interested, because I know there's dedicated channels like the Menendez. Oh, and there's a Menendez brother update. Y'all See, this is what I'm saying. Rosie O'Donnell getting involved with giving the brothers publicity, and I really hope that does something. She and Lyle had a long phone conversation, and I think they've been corresponding by mail for some time, and yeah, I just hope, I sincerely hope that those brothers are released in their lifetime and they're given credit for time served and the case is looked at through an updated lens. We didn't really have the language or social understanding of male victims of SA, particularly by family members, when this case was tried. Between that lack of understanding socially and the case getting just so much publicity, it was in the public zeitgeist, whether it was the news covering it or SNL, it was a massive thing. And also that was an era where trial television just exploded. It was the OJ era. And so I don't believe that the brothers were served justice. And I pray that they are able to see the light of day and live peaceful, quiet lives with their partners, which makes me think, okay, last update. So sorry. Okay, last update. Sorry. Gypsy Rose Blanchard is going to be released in a couple of months. And that was another short that I posted. Again, I have to go back and do my research to remind myself of everything. But my feeling about that is absolutely for sure. I am glad that and this is so interesting because talking about Menendez and Gypsy, it's like we were in a position to really have compassion for the abuse that Gypsy endured. And I know I'm not comparing apples to apples here, very different circumstances, but I think by and large, most people are in support of Gypsy not serving a life sentence. But I am very deeply disturbed by Gypsy's boyfriend or ex-boyfriend who committed the crime with her or on her behalf. I believe he was the one who murdered her mom. But she conspired with him. Without him, it never would have, without her, it never would have happened. I'm so upset I believe he's going to be in prison for the rest of his life. He got a harsher punishment than she did. And I think part of that had to do with his interview with police. I'm pretty sure he's on the spectrum, and I don't think he has the faculties to communicate his feelings about it. And who knows, maybe he has difficulty with empathy. From what I saw in that interview, it doesn't sound like it comes from a malicious place. It sounds like it comes from a stunted developmental place. And you want to talk about truly not being able to grasp the gravity of your actions. To me, that sums up that boy in a nutshell, who I'm sure is not a boy now, he's a young man. But I view Gypsy's release as bittersweet. I think that one person is rightfully getting released, and I don't believe that justice is being served as far as her ex-boyfriend goes. So again, let me know what y'all think about that. And the last thing I'll say is that I'm trying to make these videos a little bit less edited. And I've also mentioned this before, because it's the editing that takes me forever. Every little and like and pause I get so nervous about, especially early on when I had all the JonBenet viewers coming in. I got so many nasty comments that was like, watching you try to form an idea is so painful. Just like nasty stuff. And I should just choose to not let that in. But being a fairly conscientious person, I think, oh, well, it must be difficult for people to watch, and that must be painful and uncomfortable to hear someone hemming and hawing so much or using like too much, which I've gotten a lot better at. And so I would go through after that and edit and, mini splice all these things. And that takes so long. So I guess I'm asking forgiveness in advance if I ramble mama, you should know where you're getting yourself into, or if I take a little bit longer to form ideas or say or like, throw it on 1.25 or 1.5 speed. That's what I do with most of the videos I watch, and hopefully it won't be as annoying to you. But that's all I'm going to say for now, and thank y'all again so much. If there's any case in particular you want me to take a look at besides the ones that I just mentioned, I'm not going to be covering those 2 cases that I told you about that are very disturbing to me, but everything else I mentioned, JonBenet, Brian Koberger, Richard Allen, Gypsy Rose. I would like to talk about the Menendez brothers again. All of those I'm going to be revisiting, but if there's something else in addition to that you want me to take a look at, please let me know. That's all I got for now, and I'll see y'all next time.